Hello there, and welcome back to episode 3 of Lunch and Legislature. I'm Darsha here in Lincoln. Joining me, as always, Ian from our sister station in Hastings. Ian, how you feeling this morning?
I'm doing good, Darsha. I'm excited to be back here. Had a fun time last week, and we've got a lot to cover this week, so more fun to be had.
We do. We have a ton to cover. Last week was a very busy week in the legislature, the first full week in the legislature. We want to start off by talking a little update to our last episode about Senator Dan McKeon. They had a very long hearing on Monday. His attorney came in, gave more than an hour of testimony to the executive board committee. Yeah, it was a long morning. He did answer some questions. It seems like the executive board committee was a little confused, perhaps.
I think there was some confusion. I think that there was a lot of talking and not a lot of substance in that talking, I would think, for some of it. I don't want to go out, that's kind of my opinion, but like looking at the legislators, they were kind of getting tired towards the end of the 2 hours.
Yeah, there was a lot happening. Of course, it was invited testimony only, so there wasn't public comment on it. Some senators did sit in a little bit, and at the end of that meeting, they voted to send those articles of expulsion for Senator McKeon to the floor. That was scheduled for Tuesday. And we got in Tuesday morning, and we had kind of a surprise before the vote.
So, I kind of figured something was coming, and I messaged you because I messaged a couple of contacts in the legislature. I said, how are you going to vote? And nobody wanted to tell me how they were going to vote.
Yep.
And then it turns out that was because he was going to resign, and they knew he was going to resign. And so they didn't want to answer my question of how they would have to vote because they weren't going to have to vote.
Yeah, we came out onto the floor. We did our usual morning Pledge of Allegiance and the morning prayer, and as soon as they granted Senator McKeon a point of personal privilege, it became very clear that we were not going to get to a vote.
No.
It was an emotional speech. He got choked up. He didn't talk for very long, 2.5, 3 minutes. Apologized,
it was
of
very
course.
short.
Yeah. I don't know. Did senators that we kind of chatted with after, I know you chatted with a few, some of them said, well, I didn't expect this. Most of them said, I would have loved to have seen this sooner instead of getting all the way to a vote, right before a vote, going through all of this, press conferences. I don't know.
So, to break down, because I talked to 2 senators. One of them was Senator Lanuski, Adams County, Hastings. He said that he kind of knew that this was coming, but if it did get to a vote, he was going to be, not voting but present, basically, because he felt like he couldn't be the judge. He kind of, he said that he liked Dan as a guy, and so, he didn't like what was following him around, but didn't feel like he could be the judge, jury, and executioner in that state.
Yeah, it was interesting. I talked to Merv Reapy. He's from Ralston. Reapy, of course, kind of the mid-range guy in the legislature, right? And he was like, I respect that he took the time to make this decision. Everybody has to take the time to come to whatever decision they're going to come to, and it took him that long to do it. Of course, now everybody is excited because we get to move on, right, to actual legislating. But we did get an update this morning that we wanted to chat about really quick. When we talk about moving on or personnel issues, the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office announced this morning they are actually investigating Michaela Cavanaugh of Omaha. Kind of a surprise.
So if you remember back to earlier this week, or I guess was it earlier this week or last week? But basically, Governor Pellin
I think it was late last week.
Yeah, put some signs on the wall and in the legislature's hallway, basically, and Cavanaugh took them down because she says that there's a rule that they're not allowed to put those signs up, so she took them down. Pellin called it disrespectful and called for an investigation. It seems like the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office following through with that, but we'll have to see where this goes. It's kind of like one of those things where I don't know if it's more political theater than anything else. But the main thing to note is, and that I haven't said this yet, is that those signs were produced by PragerU, which is
it is a known, more conservative leaning. Typically, when you look at their work, they're often criticized for being more whitewashed in how they view history. I haven't stopped to read all of these.
No,
obviously
been
a busy week.
Lincoln, so.
It's not something that I can say, yes, this is one way or the other, but historically how we know PragerU tends to be more of this whitewashed thing.
Yeah.
Kavanaugh saying it's simply because you're not allowed to affix things to the walls.
Yeah.
She took them down. They weren't ripped down, they weren't damaged. She then told Capitol Police, yes, I have them. They were returned, they were put back up. It's been making the rounds on conservative social media as well. Some candidates that are running for legislative seats now also calling for her to be expelled. No idea if that's something the legislature will take up, but of course something that we'll be watching as well. And then to wrap up McKeon, we kind of jumped around here, and that's on me. I apologize. On Wednesday, Governor Pillen appointed Fred Meyer of St. Paul to fill McKeon's seat until this November. They'll hold a special election. Meyer hasn't said if he's going to run for that, but it is kind of a full circle moment for Fred Meyer.
It really is. Why don't you go into his background? Travis is about to do a weather hit right now, so I got to be a little quiet. So why don't you talk a little bit about his background?
Yeah, absolutely. Fred Meyer served a special session and I think part of a second session. He replaced Tom Breezy when Tom Breezy was elected to state treasurer. He was appointed to fill that seat. And then when he left, Ann McKeon replaced him. So now we're talking about kind of this real full circle moment. Fred was kind of in the know of the legislature. He was on the State Board of Education for several years, so he hasn't really been out of the loop. But he hasn't been, say, directly involved over the last few years. He's excited to get back. Governor Pillen said he'd be a great fit. Meyer didn't say anything about legislation. He's not introducing bills. He thinks
that was what shocked me.
He thinks
is
we
that
already
he
have
openly
too
was
many.
Like, I'm not going to introduce bills. I was kind of surprised by that.
I think he's really focused on this budget shortfall, which kind of lead us into the next topic. Yesterday was Governor Pillen's annual State of the State. This is the beginning of the second session, so it's mid-session. Kathleen Callis told me it's kind of like their report card. It's their checkup, right? But the budget, of course, the thing we've been talking about for months now, we know we're in a $471 million deficit. Governor Pillen's biennium budget adjustment, the red book that everybody's carrying around, right, has a line about this $471 million budget deficit. Yet yesterday he called it a makeshift budget crisis, which seemed to confuse a lot of people in the legislature. I was kind of looking around, senators like Danielle Conrad of Lincoln, who've been really outspoken about why we're in the situation that we're in, looked really surprised that he would choose those words. He did hit on, yes, the state has $2 billion in reserves, but I talked to Kathleen Callis again of Omaha about it. These are in some 900 funds, these dollars, right? Can we reallocate them? Yes, that maybe should be what we do because we're kind of hoarding taxpayer money, but we're not really using it. I don't think tapping into those $2 billion is going to be the solution that they come up with to a full degree. Governor Pillen says it's going to be a reduction in spending, millions of dollars in reductions, most notably DHHS reductions, which he kind of clarified after yesterday's State of the State that it's not just about full-time employees, it's about more efficient services, and he called any idea that the state is doing less work or is cutting services is a myth.
Mm-hmm. And there's a lot to say about that. We talk about, I'm going to go on about ABA therapy. It's for autistic children because that's one of the services that was cut. There's a lot of background to that and a lot of nuance to that because, yes, costs did rise like millions of dollars over 4 years. But at the same time, we were reimbursing at a really high rate. And so there's a middle ground that I don't think anybody really cared to reach on that one. Just from who I'm talking to, I know that Senator Quick in Grand Island is trying to look at this issue. I don't know if he's going to get anywhere with it, but I know that he's at least talked about trying to get with the program on that. But the other thing that kind of fascinated me about Pillen's address is he talked about running government like a business.
His famous
I'm not
line.
Here to say how to run your business, but if you're $470-something million in the red, that doesn't seem like a good good operating place for your business. I mean, I don't know though.
Yeah.
I sit here at the news station and I just report what other people do. So I don't have to manage millions of dollars, and I'd rather not manage millions of dollars.
He had said, the fiscal health of Nebraska, it's beyond question. The state of our state is as strong as ever. Those were the words that he said yesterday. And when you read this budget, we know that conservative spending is the thing that he's focused on. And the first line of this says, we must deliver a strong, conservative, and balanced budget and overcome the $471 million budget gap identified in the November tax rate review report. So it seemed to kind of draw confusion. Senators kind of on both sides of that metaphorical aisle. Again, it's supposed to be a nonpartisan legislature, but it really seemed to confuse people. It's supposed to be. On either side of that aisle of how are we going to say this is make-believe or made up when we know we're looking at the data put out by Pillen's administration saying that there is, in fact, a budget gap. So we'll see how that goes. I talked, you had mentioned you talked to Senator Lineski. I talked to him yesterday. He talked a little bit about, we are in this situation because we voted for these tax cuts and these exemptions over the past few years. And earlier in the year, Speaker Arch said, we just have to wait and let the revenue balance out, kind of bottom out, and then we can figure out where we're at. That seems to be how some people are looking at it. And then you have others like George Dungan and Daniel Conrad of Lincoln who are like, hey, these are tax cuts for not everyday Nebraskans, but corporations and people who are making millions of dollars, and now we're balancing the budget on the backs of everyday Nebraskans. So the budget's not going away. The deficit that is here is not going away.
Blockbuster from this session. I think that there are definitely some messaging bills that will get attention, but I think that this will end up going back to the budget. I actually did talk to Lineski about budget and a couple other things that we haven't aired that part of my interview yet because I'm on vacation next week, so I want to have something to come back to do that. So we'll see that in a couple weeks. But basically, that's exactly what he said, is that he was on the let's wait and see train. But now that we're seeing he's concerned, most of our legislators are concerned about this deficit and what they're going to do with it. Now, one of the things Pillen did talk about affordability in his speech and how that's important to people, and how he wants to do the property. What was the verbiage he used for the property tax crisis? Is that what he called it?
Our tax, I think his exact words were something like our tax crisis is out of control, or our tax situation is out of control. Yeah, it was a fairly lengthy speech the year before. Obviously, he had just gotten injured, so he wasn't able to stand and deliver a speech like this. But now we're here. It's 2026. We're mid-session. It's an election year as well for Governor Pillen. And it was interesting. At one point during his speech, he got visibly upset. We actually clipped that so you can watch it. So we're gonna play that from the governor's State of the State yesterday. Take a look.
It's hogwash if it's not bipartisan when we're talking about our kids. Man alive.
It was startling for the reporters in the Capitol Press that were turned around typing on their computers. Everybody kind of jumped. Nobody was expecting it. And in the press conference after, he said, we're recognizing, I think at the time they were recognizing a teacher, right? And he's saying some members on the Democratic side of the legislature were not feeling the spirit of bipartisanship. We're not being Nebraska nice. We're not doing what he expected them to do, which was to clap and smile and stand up and recognize them. And he was obviously very upset about that.
And it goes back to our legislature is nonpartisan in name only. When you look at that, I know that he was specifically upset with one side of the aisle for not applauding for that. And I don't know if I wasn't there. I was wearing another hat here. But I do know that was a big thing that happened.
But outside of the State of the State, or I guess tangential to the State of the State, one of the bills that he brought up is one that not only we're following closely, but a lot of people in Nebraska are following closely, and that is something that I know you're planning a deep dive on, which is LB 730, which comes from Senator Cal. So I will give you the floor, and we have some sound on that for whenever you want it. Ian, you take the floor.
All right. I will let you know. So basically, LB 730 is the bathroom bill that would require people of a certain gender to use a certain bathroom, or a certain sex, not gender, I apologize, certain sex to use a certain bathroom designated for that sex. Now, I reached out to their office, to Cal's office, and I said, so, I'm reading this bill. It says this shall not infringe upon the Americans with Disabilities Act and equality and all that. My question there was, how do you talk about people who have both reproductive organs? What bathrooms are they supposed to use? And they got back to me, and their answer was quite interesting. They basically said, look, this bill is structured so that it requires the school, organization, whatever, to create a policy, and it dumps that policy making off to the school. It says, there has to be you have to create a policy for a bathroom for a male and a bathroom for a female, and then you have to create the rest of the policy. They don't want to touch that. So I thought that was very interesting, the way that they did that, because it's hard to describe, but it's kind of an interesting, I don't want to say loophole, but kind of a way out of dealing with the really hard stuff. And I think that's going to be how they try to get this bill passed, by saying, oh, we're not, judging people. We're not demanding that you only have two bathrooms or a family bathroom or single-use bathroom. I think that is how they're going to try to get this passed.
So that was my first question to the governor in his press conference after, was the thing that we're hearing from senators is this is not enforceable, which is something we've seen as other states have tried things like this. It's not enforceable. And the governor's answer was creating the policy should be enough to then be the deterrent. And if it's not, then his words were something like, then we'll figure it out. Then we'll figure something else out. And after all of that, we were back. The legislature was invited to lunch at the governor's mansion, so they all took off to do that. By the time I got back, I had gotten a call from Kathleen Kauth, and I asked her, the enforcement mechanism of this, and she said it's crazy that people say they're going to be checking kids' genitals at the door, they're going to be checking. She's of the same belief too. This is create the policy, and she said she's worked with school boards that are on board with this. I haven't talked to any, so I will not make that statement. This is just what Senator Kauth has said.
I've reached out and not heard back.
Yeah,
but my recent track record with school boards, they don't want to talk to me anyway. So
well, that's true, but at the same time, one of the things she said that I thought was interesting was, other senators that have talked to her about this say, well, we don't want to get sued. And Senator Kauth said, well, maybe we do, because you can appeal that to the state Supreme Court. You can appeal that, as we've seen this week, to the Supreme Court of the United States, who is set to vote on transgender rights issues and make their decision. I shouldn't say vote on, make their decision later this year after hearing those arguments. And it appears from the reporting that they are leaning towards backing these. Her belief was that, yes, we may get sued, and maybe that's not a bad thing. So it'll be interesting to see how that comes out, how that affects the policy, how that affects the enforcement going forward as well. And then let's actually
before you get there, I have a question for you. This is something that I'm curious about. If she as a reporter, this is my reporter brain, I'm guessing you don't have an answer to this question, but as we're looking at this deficit, it's going to cost the state lots of money to defend something like that, to defend against that. Has she considered that at all in her decision-making on this?
Not that we've seen. And historically, we know in years where there is a budget deficit and we don't just have money to spend, social bills like this do tend to come up because they don't cost anything. So I don't think that the financial aspect of this has been thought through. If we are going to litigate something like this, what is that going to eventually cost the state? I think that is a perfectly valid question to ask, and I don't think that that's something that any of us have talked about at all.
I'll have to respond to her office again. I'm sure they love me over there, because I'm the guy that sits there and sends emails, because my shift is starts at 3 a.m, and I'm the guy who sits and sends emails at 6, 7 o'clock, just asking
does this guy sleep?
questions. And and I always apologize. I'm like, hey, I'm not trying to be biased. I'm asking questions that I know my viewers have, they're tough questions. Yeah, I apologize. They're tough. That's part of my job is I have to do that and be tough.
Exactly.
But, I'm curious about getting these answers in her office. Actually, it was very nice in their response, like, hey, we get it. We understand. You're just asking tough questions. It's your job. So you hear me ask these tough questions. That's why I have a bit of a reputation for that around here.
Exactly. Well, when I had first talked to Senator
I know you do
Kauth
too.
about this, thank you. When I had first talked to Senator Kauth about this, she had said, you know what, Senator Merv Riepe of Ralston, he's on board. He wasn't on board with it last year. They pulled out the part about sports. That was the only part they could get everybody to agree on. But Kauth's words were, Senator Riepe agrees, we'll have the 33, it's fine. Well, I talked to Senator Riepe last week or earlier this week. I couldn't even tell you what day it is anymore.
It blends together.
It does, and the session is flying by, and somehow also not. But he had said, I don't actually support that, so I'm going to play some sound. It starts with Senator Riepe talking about it, and then it goes to Senator Kauth's response after I talked to Senator Riepe. So we'll play that for you now.
Sounds good.
I did not run for the legislature to be part of a Nebraska State Potty Patrol. I think that last session we were able to put restrictions on biological men competing with women. I wanted to protect women's sports.
It's confusing. This has happened before that. He kind of goes back and forth on things. I'm hoping to keep working with him and with some of the other senators who have not sided with it.
Kauth before that had said, it doesn't seem like he's really focused. He's not really engaged, I think was the word she used, and had said, he's given other interviews where he said other things about this.
I'm sorry.
So
I just can't get over the Nebraska State Potty Patrol comment. Like, I'm sitting here trying to
That was a classic
hold it
Merv
together.
Riepe moment.
Exactly, but I'm sitting here like laughing inside, because I'm just trying to picture like people in uniforms with a potty logo on their shoulder or whatever,
Yeah.
and that's hysterical. I love that.
It's wild.
We'll have to maybe invest in that agency. I think that would be fun.
But that was what prompted the statement from Senator Kauth, who she told me, that is crazy. That was her words.
Yeah.
That is crazy. We are not checking people at the door. We are not doing that.
No.
Like, this is not happening. So that is how that kind of all came about there. So, but we'll be following this. LB, I believe 731, which is related to transgender care, is scheduled for hearing at the end of the month. So it shouldn't be long before we have a hearing set for LB 730. And we'll be able to bring you some more on that. There are plenty of other bills we are following. There's some that have not been introduced, but we are doing deep dives on, and we can't tell you about those until they get introduced, unfortunately, which is kind of tragic because they're really good. There is a bill coming next week. Senator McKeon of Omaha is introducing a constitutional amendment to lower the voting age to 16, which will be interesting. There's a hearing on that next week. So plenty of things that we're following. As always, if you're watching or you're reading online or you're following the unicameral and you have things that you want us to talk about, please reach out. We would love to know your thoughts. We would love to tailor these to things that people are interested in. So,
Yep. Appreciate it.
Awesome.
All right,
We'll
see you back here
next
next week.
Yeah. All right. We'll see you then. Thanks, Ian.
See you guys. Bye.